So, James, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on. Very much a last-minute guest. I'm pleased that you could get here so quickly. We've got this huge waiting list now for this show. I think we've got about 45 people on it. But we had someone pull out, and obviously hiring for you guys now seemed like the right time to get you on.
So, no, it's really fun to be here and excited to be able to jump in.
Yeah, it's hot outside today, which is...
It's a nice change from what it's been.
You want to be in here when it's raining. Anyway, let's talk about Shift. So recently renamed.
Yep.
So tell us about the business. We'll come on to your role in a minute, but tell us what the business does. And obviously it was called GetCapital, right? And it's just literally changed. So maybe a little bit about why that happened. And
why don't I'll use the rebrand as kind of telling you why we've moved on and what that history looks like. Cool. So it's always a little bit hard with the startup. We're about 7 years old. Yep. We started as a non-bank lender. Mm-hmm. So that was GetCapital, quite a literal name for quite a literal activity. And as we kind of grew the lending book, it became considerably more clear that there's just more problems you need to solve in finance than providing capital. So let's take a super simple example that people understand. You're buying a car. Finance is only a sliver of that experience. Yep. There's the finding the car, the pricing the car, the negotiating. Then on the other side, there's the settling, the sending of the money, the driving off. And we spend so much time thinking about this loan contract or this movement of capital in this middle bit that we just forget the experience as a whole. And so what really stood out to us as we grew this lending book was we had to solve the wider set of problems. And so our transformation over the better part of the last 3 years has been moving from this single interaction, single kind of traditional loan contract through to something that now it's a platform, right? We've incorporated platform aspects where people can interact with our products. We have products that are now not one-time use, but multiple-time use. Mm-hmm. We've integrated with payments and kind of we've moved to being a business that's really driven by data. So what does that mean? It means GetCapital as a name doesn't work anymore because we offer, the suite is just so much wider from what we're trying to do. And so we changed into Shift Financial. And that's because we're really just trying to make it clear about how wide that breadth of offering is and to make it clear that we think the experiences these people are needing to solve are difficult and need to be addressed holistically, not just in little pieces.
Okay. And do you have a particular type of customer or is it pretty much any retail customer or do you do business? Or?
So all of our customers sit in the B2B space. So we do... a lot of guys do retail and they do it well. And you have these small and medium-sized businesses that are really ignored. They're kind of left out in general. So we focus exclusively on businesses, mostly under kind of 50 million revenue.
That's still pretty big.
They're still real companies, right? These are
real companies.
They're people where this is livelihoods. You've got from staff of 2, 3, 4 people or a sole trader up to kind of staff of probably 50 to 100. We'll do the whole plethora of those groups of people. So that's kind of how it's all businesses though at the moment.
Okay. And is it secured lending or is it unsecured?
This is all unsecured at the moment. Okay. So a little bit of things like asset finance off the side, but really our bread and butter is unsecured lending done efficiently, done in a way that's transparent and done quickly. Okay. So that is, our proposition is really around that data space. How do we make sure we use what we know to make this just a better experience of both sides of the equation?
Cool. And if we think about, I guess, the unsecured part, so it could be anything. Is that sort of lending money for anything, or do you have to specify what you're spending it on, or how does that sort of work? Because there'll be a massive variety of different needs in companies between that scale.
No doubt, right? And we do, and this is one of the places in finance that everyone's still trying to work out. It's like, how do you have that human experience, the conversation, as well as using the data to work out what they're doing, right? Yep. How do you get that omni-channel thing right? The majority of our lending is in working capital, right? So it's lending against, it's revolving facilities that people can draw down against on their own right and use for their day-to-day working capital experiences. 100% the use cases change, right? But we're assessing these people on their risk, not necessarily on their use case. So we'll still have the conversation, especially in things like some of the longer dated term loans or some of the more when we're taking a larger risk, we might have those conversations. But at the end of the day, if we're giving people a 4-year facility, the last 3 months or this current use case is not going to be a fair way to think about their risk. It's in a much bigger conversation. So we're thinking, is this business worth becoming a partner with? And we're becoming a partner with this cash flow product.
That's interesting. I've not heard that model before. So that kind of dovetails nicely into your role. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing there. Obviously, you're growing your team at the moment, which is why we're talking to you. But what's your actual role?
Yeah, so I joined the company about 2 years ago, as we were kind of moving from that startup through the scale-up journey. And what we really realized was that there is this data capability that we need. We'd obviously established a very strong business. It was working. It was producing cash. But the way to make that thing scale was to get data right. And you need to get data right for the lending that you're talking about now, but also for the experience that you offer people, for how your internal teams use the tools that they have, and for the new things that we want to launch. So that's kind of A. And then B, lending is not the most scalable thing in the world, right? Because you do need capital to do that. Whereas things like data, things like payments are much more scalable businesses. So as we moved into that scale-up time, those things become a little bit more important. So I was kind of tasked with setting up the data capability. And that kind of has, as you can imagine, product components, internal, inside-y components, software infrastructure components, as you think about how these are different. So we spent the better part of the last 2 years trying to build out a team that can address those 3 sets of problems, right? We started sorting out infrastructure and technology. So there is obviously a high blend of similar talents between technology and data infrastructure. But there is a slight difference because where a technologist might think about the journey and what flows in where, the data team actually really care about how those numbers interact and how they operate. So we separated those teams and we built out some infrastructure. Once we'd built out infrastructure, we needed people to pick up that data and do something with it because it's all great having it. You need to use it. So we built out kind of the traditional insights, data science, kind of choose the buzzword you want to use, but the team that add value.
Data science has got to be that's the buzzword.
And I think that is the one, right? And I think they get unfairly punished sometimes by calling reporting. Sometimes they might be overinflated, but the idea is really these are the people that story tell over what we've put together. And then on top of that, we've brought in machine learning modelers. We've brought in people that help build out our data product. And so we're really just looking to consolidate that team at the moment because, as you can imagine, there's just infinite use cases in that space. And so
infinite.
It really is, right? And the big challenge in an infinite space is what really has that blend of customer and revenue opportunities that come together in that space. But really, that's where we're working through at the moment. And so we're hunting around, as you say, for just great, talented people that are happy to attack these really big problems.
Lots of great, talented people being hunted for at the moment.
No doubt.
So 7 years, but it's quite a long time. A lot of people we have on here are probably earlier stage. Where is Shift in financially in terms of its funding? Is it a profitable business now? Is it still on the VC journey? Did it go on the VC journey? You know, where did it sort of come from in that respect?
Yeah, so the journey's been, I'd call it kind of strong methodical growth. So by essentially every metric, we've doubled in size for the last 7 years.
It's pretty
year on year.
Impressive.
It is, and you're starting from a small base, obviously. But yeah, we're still seeing that kind of double customer numbers, double revenue, double the loan book.
7 years in a row. That is insane to keep that up.
And it's been really strong, and I think that also speaks to, I think it definitely speaks to what we set up and the products that we run, but also to the size of the market that we're addressing, and the fact that these people have just been ignored really by the traditional infrastructure that's been in that space. And so there is demand. I think that it gets a bad rap for being risky. It's not been our experience that there's, like anything, there's definitely a risk, but I'd say that distribution of risk is different to people might say it is. And so that's been our journey so far. We don't run the losses of the guys you read in the newspaper. We run a tighter ship in that regard, and we kind of run at that doubling size. And
that's that way to continue. So where do the capital that you lend, do you borrow that at a lower rate from someone else, or is that your own capital that you've just grown over time and that sort of slow growth?
Yeah, so similar to traditional banking, right? We have to put up some amount of money because we have to be on the journey with them. But we have warehouse facilities that we use to do a chunk of that. So we have big kind of public warehouse facilities that we do that. We haven't securitized anything in the market, but it's all been those warehouse facilities at the moment.
Okay, I think a lot of the people that watch this show would be interested in that. We get a mix of founders who are just riding that VC wave and they just keep getting, money and they're just the burn rate, as they like to call it. But then we get plenty of others that are self-funded and cash flow, having also run 3 businesses myself, cash flow is always the most difficult part of any business. I am not a financial person. I am not good with numbers. And it still puzzles me how you can have this huge profit figure at the bottom of your P&L and have no money in the account ever. It's like magical working capital. And it's funny, when I started Nudge, I managed it all myself, which I soon realized was a bad idea. And we never had any money. And literally, honestly, it was the bizarrest thing. Within a week of having proper accountants manage everything for me, so completely outsourcing it, there was always money in the account. I don't understand. And I don't know if I want to.
I think that's completely fair. And I think everyone's a little bit different. But I think it dovetails into one of the products that we've spent a lot of time on in the last 2 years is we have a trade credit facility. And so trade credit is this just horribly broken thing where the person supplying is essentially offering free credit for often incredible amounts of time. There's this power imbalance. So you go and interact with a big supplier, they're going to bully you. You interact with a little buyer, you're going to it's not a clean relationship. But at the same time of that, you're trying to build out these suppliers, buyers tend to be together for a long time. You tend to buy your milk from the same person you're going to be buying your milk from for a long time. And that consistency and reliability is often as important as the price and the way you do it. So we've spent a lot of time in this trade credit space. And it's just, I think when it comes down to managing money, what we've seen is it's the consistency, it's the knowing where you are, and it's the knowing how things are going to change. And I think it's exactly the same with the financial products when people interact with them. People aren't afraid of debt. People aren't afraid of having a small amount of money in their account. People are afraid of not being able to predict the future or not having something to fall back on if things change. And so I think your experience, very consistent with a lot of the people that we've interacted with. That's why we have revolving facilities that people can dip in and out of because those things change. That's why we have a trade credit, because for a lot of businesses, that 30, 60, 90 days is the difference between paying staff and not paying staff if things go the wrong way. And that's why we think about the experience, not the loan contract. I could give you 500 grand in a single term loan experience. It doesn't solve your working capital problems because they're more complicated than that.
Yeah, and it tends to disappear when you do things like that, I think, And then there's no topping it up. You're right. I think you're right. It's an interesting space. I didn't realize that it was you had so many different products.
Yeah. So we and I think that's one of the things, especially in the non-bank space, that really differentiates us. But we have working capital products, we have asset finance products, and we have trade credit products. With the idea being, back to the original point we were speaking to on the experience. If you don't solve the whole pie in some format or another, well, what are you doing? You're a commodity. You haven't necessarily, you've come in, you've helped purchase a car. That's great. They're not going to interact with you again. Maybe they will when they buy another car. But these people have finance needs every day. And they differ. And it's also industry specific. How do you appeal to multiple industries? Some people don't have trade credit. I can't imagine you have a huge amount of invoices compared to take a construction guy, sorry. He's going to be a huge part of his life is this trade credit. So getting that balance right and making sure that people can actually use them for the use case that they need them for, not just to produce a bit of capital for an experience.
And tell me, how has the rebrand gone? Shift? Because it's a big change. GetCapital shift. They're very different. Yeah,
it's a legitimate change, right? It's gone well, right? Because I think most people understand that the service we were offering was fundamentally different to the name that we were running under. And so I think people, it's kind of like, yes, now it makes sense. So it's gone well in that regard. We're going out, we're promoting in a way that we haven't done a huge amount in the past. So we're kind of out there, we're proud of what we've built and we're making a lot of noise about it. So that's going well. And then I think with things like a rebrand, the big thing is internally. I think internally people think of people loved working at GetCapital, but they saw their job as bigger than this one interaction. Okay. And so you really see it in the staff. They think this is a fair representation now of what we do. And
That's
how we do
great.
It has been really good, right? And like everywhere, we have plenty of challenges. It's not all perfect, but I do think it does speak to the way we've approached stuff, right, is incremental growth. And we've made this transition after we had the things in market, not before. Like, these are real things people are using, they're interacting with. And so we can stand behind them and say, they're there, right? It's not a desire.
Cool. So am I right thinking you were working in a big bank before, is that right? Or?
I did a bit of boutique consulting, I did a bit of investment banking, but it was all in the professional services side. So this was I trained as an aero engineer. I built some drones for a little while.
Cool.
Turns out, super cool, building drones for the military. There's some dicey ethics to it. The technology, unbelievable, right? But funnily enough, you don't really have an interaction with the customer. You don't really do much, right? You're sitting in a lab. You have to love the actual hands-on technology.
Yeah.
And for me personally, the fun of work is the people, not the customers, the internal things, the building such as people use it. If you're an engineer building a plane, you have a request for proposal, you disappear for 6 years, you build this thing, you come back and you say, it flies this far. The tech is mad. The lifestyle's weird. Well, it wasn't for me.
Very solitude.
It very much so. I remember asking my boss if I could have an office with a window. And he said, he gave me a webcam and he said, you can stream the harbor if you want on the wall.
You know, I remember when I did my first IT recruitment job, which was, I'm not going to tell you what year it was, but it was certainly before the year 2000. And it was back in the day when IT was always in the cellar, always. And I was in London, and you go to these beautiful buildings, right? And then you'd come through the door and they'd say, oh, you go down there. And you go down and there'd just be this horrible basement full of people, no windows, everything was white, and there was just bits and wires and stuff. Every was obviously before the cloud. And I guess it would be like that. And I my very, very first office when I started my very first business, the only thing I could afford was an officeless windows. It was an internal box, right? And there was me in there. 8 months I was on my own. I had a plant that I would talk to. I got slightly insane. But the strangest thing was you'd come out, and sometimes you come out for lunch, sometimes you just sort of work through. And it could be a completely different day. You know, you could have gone in blazing sunshine. You come out, it's the weirdest, coldest day, and it's you kind of lose track of time. I've almost lost my sanity, I reckon. So I can definitely understand that. And if you're embedded in little intricate drones as well, which I imagine are not simple things, and you've got to get it right. Did the days just fly by, or did you? Because you get so engrossed.
The time 100% flies by, right? Because you're 100% concentrated on some small aspect of what you're doing. Some people love it, right? And they'd be happy to lose weeks and weeks on end in that nitty-gritty detail.
But not
wasn't for me. And then I jumped in professional services for a bunch of time. Loved it, right? You're touching on all these different people, all their problems. You're regularly changing what you're addressing. You're learning stuff that you have no idea that thing even happened. You jump in for 6 weeks into some company that's bizarre or weird. And they're fun, right?
We get that. I get that a lot as well.
Yeah, and 100%. And I love those parts of services. The thing that drew me out of services, and then especially into Shift, was what's great about consulting is you spend 6 weeks working out what's wrong, then you leave. You don't actually get to.
You don't get to fix
You don't
anything.
get to do it. You don't get to see like, oh, I was actually right. I was wrong. Like, how did it? And I think it really underestimates executing, right? Ideas are amazing. Clever people doing clever stuff's useful. Executing's hard.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you just don't leaving professional services. You're somewhat naive to how hard some things would be.
Well, I think you develop almost, not unhealthy and not unfounded, almost a little bit of arrogance, because you strut in and you tell everyone what's wrong and then you leave. You don't have to worry about it, but you're right because you told them what's wrong. I think people who do work in it a long time, and it's no fault of theirs, it's just I guess that's what's going to happen to you. So tell me, when you went to Shift, since you've been there 2 years now, obviously it's a startup. What's been the thing that you've learned the most, or what's been the most challenging thing about going into an environment like that?
I think for me, it's the executing.
Yeah.
It's actually exactly that same point where I would have happily been a bit naive to how hard it would be to do stuff. At just the nitty gritty level, hey, you want to launch this new thing, field 7 on page whatever of this thing doesn't change automatically. So all of a sudden, that's days of someone's developing, someone's changing. And so I think what I've changed is I don't necessarily think I have decreased how important I think strategy is, decreased how important I think thinking is, or having a plan. But I think I've now increased how much I think that you should place a priority on execution, right? We see the same thing in data. You could run off just the top of your head 15 cool things you'd love to see on your banking app. Executing on a bunch of them would be difficult. Executing in a way that's useful for you and useful for the company gets even more difficult.
Yep.
And so much of the stuff you build was a great idea. It's not even used. And so I think for me, the big change has been realizing that getting that execution right, getting the rhythm right, getting the feedback from customers right is just so important. And I think you might go, yeah, of course it is. But I think sitting in services where you don't have that feedback loop, you don't necessarily internalize it until you have to mess one execution up.
You know what? I had a meeting yesterday, and you'll get this totally. And so the gentleman who has a services business, and he's building an app. And look, it's out and it's working, and it's pretty good. But I was just saying, what's it been like? He's gone, oh, it's insane. The things you don't think about. He goes, you know, for the people that are using this app, quite a lot of them are older. He goes, and they often have a bigger font on their phone. He goes, completely messes our app up. I never thought about that because I don't have that. He goes, it's things like that. And he goes, in the feedback loops, he goes, stuff you just don't, he goes, it's obvious, but you just don't think about it if it doesn't affect you personally. And then they come and they say, can you do that? He goes, and I go, of course we can. He goes, and then someone tells me how much it's going to be. And he goes, I can't believe how much it's going to be to fix that problem. I guess that would be exactly what you're talking about, right?
It's exactly the same thing. And that's why I'm a big fan of having a team that have kind of a bit more general set of skills, because unless you've kind of had to sit and, like, by no means am I a good coder, right? But unless you had to sit and try and do something in a piece of code, or you've had to actually sit in a customer interview and hear why it didn't work, it's really hard to internalize why these things are hard, right? Most things aren't slow because people don't want it to be quick. They're slow because they're much harder than we've internalized. And so that's where it comes back to me for just execution, execution done well, execution done cleanly. You don't need the $1 billion idea, right? You need a idea executed really well, and that can be a $1 billion company.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that's a great. No one said that on this show before. I think that's very, very accurate. You don't need a billion. In fact, most $1 billion ideas are incredibly simple.
Or copies of somebody else's $1 billion idea. Change a color and execute. But at the end of the day, it is, do you do the simple thing that you promise a little bit better than the person that's already doing it? And so that's for us, right? It's back to your working capital thing. It's consistency, it's reliability, it's knowing what the interaction you're going to have with your group is. Easy for most people to think about, but like we're trying to do stuff with a mortgage at the moment, and you just don't know what you're getting into. You go into these auctions and somebody's told you have money, someone's told you don't have money. You think, I probably have money because my friends had money and they bought a house. We have very similar jobs, but you don't know, and it takes so long for you to know stuff. I think it really comes down to that execution piece, right?
So let's talk about your team. You're obviously growing at the moment.
Yep.
We'll be showing this clip to everyone we talk to. Tell. This is your opportunity to say now. Why would someone want to come and work for Shift, and more particularly in your team?
Yeah, I think the big thing about my team is autonomy, right? What we truly believe at Shift, and then into the team itself as well, is that we're going to grow at the rate of our people, and our people are going to grow at the rate of the company, right? And as you continue to grow, people's roles are going to grow, the things they're going to tackle are going to grow, right? And they're always, I don't know the job I'm hiring for, right? Because if my company's 2 times bigger in a year, the role's probably going to have grown. It's probably going to have changed. And so in that, we try to hire intelligent, creative people that are happy with some uncertainty and want autonomy, because they're going to need to take on autonomy. We don't have the resources to attack every single problem at every single moment, to kind of it's probably the wrong word, but we can't handhold these people, right? Because there's so many problems that we're attacking.
Yeah.
The great thing about our environment is that autonomy. And then in that autonomy, it's a very safe place to fail. So it's not autonomy without repercussion. It's autonomy with feedback. It's autonomy understanding that you're probably attacking a problem we haven't attacked before. And it's that feedback loop. It's that autonomy that I think we ingrain it across the company. One of our values is to challenge convention, right? Mm-hmm. And by definition, if you're challenging convention, you're probably doing something that no one's done before. And so
that's
the idea, right? Does it always hold true? It's quite hard to come up with novel things. But I think for us, it's around that idea of if you're challenging a convention, you're doing it in a kind of autonomous way. You're understanding these problem statements are much bigger than the two numbers that you're looking at. Those are the people that are successful with us. And then what we offer in return is roles that grow really quickly, a place that's always developing. We use world-class leading tools. We're a new company, so we don't have legacy problems. We're sitting in the cloud. We have nice infrastructure, right? You're setting something up yourself. You get to debate which of these things you want to use and how you want to use them, right? So they're the kind of things that I think are really empowering at Shift. And I think they're unique, right? So I debate this with my sister all the time. We go to this cafe that we really like, and she thinks it's this great cafe. It's been running for 30 years, one family, the business hums. She thinks, what a perfect business. There's no effort.
What does your sister do?
She works in consulting. She works for Bain in consulting. And she's like, this thing hums and it's lovely. And I think, wow, it's so boring. It hasn't grown in 30 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference where she loves the nuance of everything. She loves making sure that thing's perfect. She loves the structure of it. And I don't think that's better or worse, right? I think it's just about knowing. I love attacking the new problem statements, going into where something's unstructured, the autonomy to try something new and do something. And so that's a very similar team that we're trying to build, right? I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to help us 2, 4, 8, 16 times the size of the business is today.
Yeah,
right?
I think you're right. I think there are certain people that are very much attuned to startups and scale-ups, and they love the ambiguity and they love tinkering and they love wanting to make it better and they can't leave it alone. Yep. Whereas you do get people, yes, who just want to become complete masters at what they do, and that's it. They're happy with that.
And I don't think either's better or worse, right, in any format. I just think
we need
100%, and the business will go through different stages of life where we'll need other ones. But I think it's just important that people know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
And for us, you're really getting into opportunity.
How big is it now? How big is Shift in terms of
we'd be about 250.
Yeah, it's quite big. And how many, just out of interest, what have you done with the whole remote thing now?
Yeah, so I think the remote thing's fascinating, right? I would say over the last 6 months, people have actually internalized how complicated the remote problem is.
It's terrifying.
And so we've gone fully remote, right?
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, so we've got, depending on the team you're in, there's a hybrid model. Right. My team sits in the fully remote regard. We ask people to come in quarterly for a couple of days to do big strategy sessions, big offsites. But I think the journey was interesting, right? We did 4 or 5 months in Sydney. We did longer lockdowns in other parts of the country. It was clear the world doesn't end when you work from home.
No.
It was clear people were still productive. It was clear people could do it. They missed seeing people, but it was clear it worked. And then as we were thinking about what does that policy mean, if you ask people to come in 2 or 3 days a week, their lifestyle's not changing. They still have to live in the same suburb. They still have to make it in. So you're not getting any benefit of remote, apart from the fact that you can do your laundry on a Monday if you want. And that's not only is that not a value prop, right? Most places did that before anyway, but it doesn't actually internalize what we've worked out in that 4 months we can do. And so for us, it was, well, let's give people the right to kind of disappear, right? They'll work the same hours that we work, but if they work them with an NBN connection on a farm, who cares, right? And they can, you're hiring these people, you're hiring them to be autonomous, you're hiring them to be creative. If you have to sit over them, you've hired the wrong people.
Yeah, I agree with that very much. And I think that's an argument that I have had a lot.
Yeah, and so we have guys that are slowly spreading out over the country, right? And we still want them to come back quarterly. We still want them to see a face. I think it's important for them. The majority of this team still comes in because most people don't just hear remote and go, I need to live on a farm. No. Most people go, I quite like Glebe. So I'm going to stay in Glebe. And I quite like the office.
You live in Glebe?
I live in Annandale, so I live next to Gleam.
You want to get to Gleam, right?
It seemed on the nose to use my own suburb. But yeah, that was our idea, was that essentially you're giving autonomy back to the staff, and you're really saying, hey, let's get together when we need to get together.
Yeah.
But enjoy what technology has let us do.
I think that's good. I think you're right. I think everyone wants different things. There is no right or wrong. And I think if you enforce any kind of policy, then you're going to upset a certain or alienate a certain population of potentially very, very good candidates. You just have to have all the options open. Some people genuinely want to come in 5 days a week.
Yep.
So that, I understand that. If you've got a young family, there are times where it's impossible to work because there's just too much going on. And other times when you might want to be home. So I think you're right. And I think a lot of companies have got it wrong when they've come back with a blended policy, but you still, like you said, you still have to come in 2 days a week. You're right. You're not giving them any more freedom. You're probably saving them a bit of money on parking or public transport, but that's about it.
I just think the problem, it's just harder, right? On one side, we've proved we can work from home and it's fine. On the other side, we've proved being remote all the time for most people isn't very fun.
No.
And so now we internalize this issue as difficult. Let's spend some time in it.
Yeah, people don't like talking about it anymore either.
No, they don't. So we'll see what happens.
We will. Well, Dave, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was great to have you on. And thank you for standing in last minute.
No, it's been a pleasure.
And look, for anyone who's watching, we're a few days out from Christmas. So enjoy your Christmas break.
Oh, thank you. And you too.
Thanks, mate.